Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Idle Park Talk Show. On today's episode, we are going to be looking at the relationship between Iran and the United States under the Memorandum of Understanding, as well as the ongoing negotiation between the two states. There's no denying the fact that the United States and Iran have been adversaries for almost 5 decades. Most Americans would probably say that the Islamic Republic of Iran has been at war with the United States throughout this period. But it has largely been a Cold War, a conflict fought through intelligence operations, economic pressure, proxy actors, sanctions, cyber operations, and political influence rather than a conventional military confrontation. From Iran's perspective, the United States has spent decades trying to weaken the Islamic Republic of Iran and by undermining its economy, isolating it diplomatically, and challenging the legitimacy of its leaders. Washington, for its part, has argued that these measures were intended to counter Iran's regional influence and security activities. Most recently, the United States intensified economic pressure on Iran. Former U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bennett publicly described the use of economic tools as a form of strategic statecraft designed to pressure Tehran without directly confronting it militarily. The resulting economic hardship contributed to widespread protests inside Iran. Those protests were met with a heavy-handed response by the Iranian authorities, leading to death and arrest, many deaths and arrest, of course. These events later became one of several issues cited by the United States and Israel in justifying their military action against Iran. Clearly felt like a trap. You push the people, you deprive them of economic opportunities, you deprive them of basic necessities, and of course, at some point, they would turn against the government. And when these happen, the Iranian authorities, of course, attempted to quash this movement, and of course, the heavy-handed nature of their handling of this crisis, of course, gave the United States and Israel good reason, one of many reasons to launch an attack on Iran. After decades of Cold War, the conflict became a hot war. The United States and its ally Israel fought the war that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has argued for during much of his political career. Now, we can spend hours debating who won the war, who lost it, who manipulated whom into it, and who bears the greatest responsibility. Probably Israel, probably Benjamin Netanyahu. But that is not the topic of our conversation today. Those are debates that are already happening, and rightfully so. With the US midterm elections approaching, Republicans and Democrats will undoubtedly revisit many of these questions. But today, that's not where we want to focus. I want to focus on what comes after the war. After 109 days of fighting, from February 28th until June 15, 2026, the parties announced a memorandum of understanding, laying a foundation for what they hope will become a comprehensive peace agreement within 60 days. The Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding was signed on June 17th. The first face-to-face negotiations followed on June the 21st in Switzerland. The Iranian delegation was led by Chief Negotiator Mohammed Kalibaf and Foreign Minister Abbas Harachi, alongside senior officials responsible for security, banking, and energy, which are all important components of this negotiation. The American delegation was led by Vice President J.D. Vance, accompanied with the obvious suspects, White House Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law. Despite a few public disagreements, including President Donald Trump threatening to resume military strikes and Iran briefly suspending participation, the negotiations continue. After 18 hours of direct talks, both sides announced sufficient progress for their technical teams to continue working on the details. So, the question today is no longer whether Washington and Tehran can sit down in the same room. They can. They already are. The real question is much bigger. Can they actually reach a lasting agreement? That is the question. The next 60 days may answer that question. Before discussing what remains unresolved, let's acknowledge something important. The Memorandum of Understanding has already produced tangible results. First, and by far the most important, is simple: the guns have fallen silent. Iran and the United States agreed to cease military operations against one another, including operations connected to Lebanon. Whether whatever your political whatever your politics may be, fewer bombs, fewer funerals, fewer destroyed cities is a positive development. That alone matters. The second major development involves the Strait of Hormuz. For weeks, one of the world's most important shipping lane was effectively closed. Under the memorandum, the United States agreed to begin removing its naval blockade, while Iran agreed to facilitate safe commercial navigation through the strait for an initial 60 days period. The results: oil tankers began moving again. Millions of barrels, excuse me, millions of barrels of oil returned to the international market. Energy supplies increased. Oil prices declined. Consumers have already begun noticing lower gasoline prices in several countries, including Canada and the United States. Here in Calgary, average gasoline prices have dropped noticeably compared to only a few weeks ago. President Trump has even accused major oil companies, including ExxonMobil, BP, and Shell, of not passing enough of those savings on the consumers, ordering an investigation into potential price manipulation. Whether you support Trump or not, lower energy prices matter. They, eff- they affect inflation. They affect transport. They affect transportation. They affect food prices. They affect interest rates. In other words, they affect every household in Canada, in the United States, and in many parts of the world. The reopening of the strait allows the United States to reduce its reliance on the strategic petroleum reserve, something President Trump frequently criticized Joe Biden for doing. Another significant development concerns sanctions. The United States has temporarily waived sanctions on Iranian oil exports. For the first time since 2018, Iran can openly sell its oil in the international market. That could begin flowing into the Iranian economy. There are also reports that approximately $12 billion in frozen Iranian assets may be released. Vice President J.D. Vance argued that if those funds are unfrozen, they should primarily purchase American agricultural products. His argument is straightforward: feed the Iranian people while helping the American farmers. Iran, however, insists that the money belongs to Iran and should be used according to Iran's own priorities. That disagreement alone illustrate what these negotiations are all about. At this point, many people ask, what exact what exactly are they negotiating? The easiest way to answer this question is by asking another question. What does each side wants? You have to figure out what Trump wants for America and what the Iranians want from these negotiations. Let's begin with President Donald Trump. Let's begin with President Donald Trump. Interestingly, one noticeable feature of these negotiations is Israel's reduced visibility. Israel was America's closest military partner during the conflict. Yet, Israel was not a signatory to the Memorandum of Understanding, nor has Israel participated directly in the negotiation. Members of the Trump administration, including President Trump himself, have publicly criticized Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's handling of the war in Lebanon, particularly civilian casualties emanating from Israeli attacks in the south of Lebanon. Trump eventually suggested that Syria under Ahmed al-Sharaa might manage Hezbollah more effectively than Israel. Whether one agrees with that assessment or not, it reflects the remarkable level of frustration between Washington and Jerusalem. Back to the question. So what does Trump want? His objectives appear to be both official and political. Officially, Donald Trump wants to ensure Iran never develops a nuclear weapon. Trump has repeatedly argued that he is the first American president in decades willing to confront Iran's nuclear ambitions directly. Iran, meanwhile, insists it is not seeking nuclear weapons. Instead, Tehran argues it has a very legal right under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to maintain a peaceful civilian nuclear program. That is where the negotiation becomes difficult. Can Iran retain peaceful nuclear technology while convincing the United States and the rest of the world that it will not pursue a nuclear weapon? That's where the International Atomic Energy Agency enters the discussion. But even that remains controversial. Washington says inspections are essential. Iran remains deeply suspicious after years of disputes with the agency, the IAEA. That issue has not yet been resolved. Trump's second major objective concerns freedom of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. Before the war, ships moved freely. Today, Iran exercises unprecedented influence over navigation through the strait. The memorandum allows commercial traffic to resume, but it also recognizes Iran's role in future administration alongside Oman. That is a remarkable strategic shift. Iran leaves these If Iran leaves these negotiations with long-term influence over one of the world's most important maritime corridor, that would represent an extraordinary geopolitical victory for Iran. Trump also has political ambitions. If negotiations succeed, he can claim a major foreign policy victory: lower oil prices, reduction in inflation, and proof that his calls peace through strength actually works. With midterm elections approaching, those achievements would become central Republican campaign themes. But negotiations are only a complicated, but negotiations aren't only complicated because of technical issues. They are complicated because nobody trusts anybody. Washington does not trust Tehran. Tehran certainly does not trust Washington. Both governments accuse each other of violating previous agreements. Iran still remembers the collapse of the JCPOA. The United States questions Iran's previous commitments. The history That history hangs over every conversation. And then there is Israel. Israel's views are strong. Israel's views a stronger Iran as an existential threat. Many Israeli leaders fear any agreement that leaves Iran economically strong and regionally more influential. Whether Israel ultimately accepts any final agreement remains one of the biggest unanswered questions. This brings me to what I believe is the most important point of today's conversation. People think these negotiations are all about peace. They are only partly right. The negotiations are just as much about power. Who has leverage? Who sets the rules? Who writes the final agreement? Who controls the Strait of Hormuz? Who controls sanctions? Who controls nuclear inspections? Who walks away stronger than they were before February 28th? That's the real negotiation. Nations rarely negotiate out of goodwill alone. They negotiate from strength, they negotiate from leverage, they negotiate from strategic interests. Peace may be the destination, but power determines who draws the map. Perhaps the real question isn't whether the United States and Iran want peace. They probably do. The real question is, what price is each side willing to pay for that peace? And when these negotiations finally end, who will emerge with more influence, more leverage, more power than they had before this war began? Until those questions are answered, what we are watching may be less a peace process and more a strategic pause in a conflict that neither side can afford to continue. Thank you very much for watching. If you found today's program informative, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others. I will see you again very soon on the Idle Park Talk Show. Thank you.